What are two things that go hand in hand as a perfect combination? Name the first thing that comes to your mind. For me, the first thing I thought of was peanut butter and jelly. For you, I don't know what you came up with because I can't read your mind. Yet. There is one other combination that comes to my mind as a perfect pair, however. Anime in the fighting game genre. Unfortunately, this pairing has not worked out to the best results in the past. This is due to these projects not being given a chance to succeed, but that is a topic for another time. For now, let's discuss the golden child of this pairing. Dragon Ball FighterZ. Dragon Ball FighterZ exploded onto the scene, capitalizing on one of the most popular IPs in the world, and combining that with an art style that does the anime justice on top of a fighting game system that does its best to resemble the explosive fights that Dragon Ball is known for. Dragon Ball FighterZ would continue on to become one of the best fighting games of the past decade, leaving its own mark on the FGC as one of the greats. This made everyone ask the same question, however. Which anime IP will get the FighterZ treatment next? There are plenty of IPs that can fit the bill of being the base of the next fighters, such as Naruto, Bleach, and that other anime that seems like it will never end and I'm not going to name. I think, however, that there is another IP that might be more likely to happen and could do quite well, and possibly even mirror the success of FighterZ. My Hero Academia. This now begs the question, what would a My Hero FighterZ even consist of? Would ArcSys even consider working with Bandai again? Do the IP holders even believe that My Hero Academia has the potential to be given a FighterZ level budget? We can't answer all these questions, so let's at least try to answer the ones we can, even though they might be more theory crafting than anything, starting with, what would a My Hero Academia FighterZ art style even look like? The easy answer to this question would be that it would just look or have a similar art style to Dragon Ball FighterZ itself. The issue with this, however, is that we know that the Dragon Ball FighterZ art style itself is not easy to make according to the developers. This is one of the reasons why costumes were never truly introduced into Dragon Ball FighterZ, besides the exception of the Videl alternate costume. Now, I know some people don't truly believe this reason given by the devs, but for now, let us just take them at their word. I think it is reasonable to assume that My Hero Academia also would not be able to acquire the same budget that Dragon Ball did for development. Because even though the series might be super big right now and is probably one of the more iconic new-gen series, Dragon Ball is the anime, especially globally. So compared to Dragon Ball, I think it's safe to assume that My Hero just would not get that same budget. So what would be an art style that could still do justice for the series, as well as look better than some of the previous My Hero Academia games that have come out? The answer is right in front of us, as it recently came out. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. In my opinion, a 2D anime fighting game would look great in the same art style that Sparking Zero has used. Now, does Sparking Zero look as good as FighterZ does? No, FighterZ is still the better looking game in my opinion, but I truly don't think we will ever get another anime fighting game that has the same care and attention to the animation, graphics, the look that FighterZ did. At least not in the foreseeable future. Fingers crossed that I'm wrong, but regardless of that, Sparking Zero still looks amazing in its own right, and I truly do believe it can be a great style for a 2D fighter while being more budget friendly. Now, maybe I'm making a huge assumption here because I don't know much about the budget for how Sparking Zero did its art style compared to FighterZ, because we haven't seen much discussion about it, or at least I haven't seen any articles about it. So I could be completely wrong here, but just judging from what I know of game development, which is very little, I do think Sparking Zero is probably a little bit easier to make in terms of art style than FighterZ was. In fact, we've already seen another anime series take a similar approach to the look in Bleach. Bleach Rebirth of Souls is a new anime game that recently came out that has, in my opinion, a pretty similar art style to Sparking Zero, just a little bit different with the shading. Now, I think Sparking Zero looks more refined than Bleach Rebirth of Souls, but this is a good show of how the art style could work with the non-Dragon Ball franchise. Now, some FGC members may think, who cares about the graphics, I just want the game to play good and not like trash. And that's a valid point. But keep in mind, at this point in the game industry, your game needs to look great in order to attract more of the casual audience. FighterZ would not have been the success it was if it did not have its amazing art style. This is why it is imperative that fighting games are actually given a budget to succeed and not just the bare minimum. Because if you get the bare minimum, the game is not going to succeed outside of the FGC, which is very niche. Now that we nailed down the look of the game, what about the gameplay itself? This is where the game could take many different approaches. The traditional 1v1 approach could be used, or maybe we go 2v2 style, like 2XKO or BlazBlue Cross Tag. What about the beloved 3v3 style from games like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and Dragon Ball FighterZ? My Hero Academia could fit into all these gameplay styles and still be able to replicate the feel of the anime or the series itself. But there is a better answer than just going with one of these styles. The answer is to use all of them. This idea came to me once I heard of another fighting game that does the same thing. Skullgirls. To explain quickly, in Skullgirls, the player is allowed to pick how many characters they want on their team, and depending on the amount chosen, it will affect your team in various ways. If you decide to fight with one character, your solo character will have more health, deal more damage, not have to deal with incoming mix, and etc. If you select 2 or 3 characters, the health you would have as a solo character would now be split between your characters chosen, so each character actually has less health than if they were just be solo. You do gain access to being able to use assists, DHC cancels, you're able to heal by tagging out your characters, and etc. Now, I might be missing some other features, but you get the gist of it, right? I feel like this system would not only increase the fun of the game, as different strategies will form around your team size, but it will also follow how the series actually plays out at times. Imagine how hype it would be to play a solo Shigaraki versus a team of Deku, Bakugo, and Todoroki. Maybe a match with Deku and All Might versus All For One and Shigaraki. You could even replicate the 1v1 fight between Deku and Todoroki from Season 2. This type of team setup would allow for a lot of diversity and let itself be different from other fighting games, because as far as I know, Skullgirls is the only modern fighting game that does this. I haven't heard of any other fighting game that does this in the modern day and age. We talked about art style and gameplay style now, so what could be next? The roster. Now, if the plan is for this to be a game that allows for teams of 3 characters, we're gonna need a decent sized roster. Luckily, My Hero Academia has a great diverse cast that translates pretty well over to a fighting game, in my opinion. You're going to have your locked in picks such as Deku, Bakugo, All Might, All For One, Dabi, and so forth. There are still some choices that need to be made regarding how certain characters would be handled, however. For example, Deku and Shigaraki. These two go through major changes throughout the series, resulting in major changes in their combat styles. You only include one version of the character that is essentially their complete or final version? Or do they get the Goku and Vegeta treatment of having multiple different versions of themselves taking up spots on the roster? I think the answer is to have multiple versions, as the growth throughout the series is quite big. These different versions can very easily have completely different playstyles and looks from each version in a way that I don't believe would draw ire from the player base the way that Goku and Vegeta did in Dragon Ball FighterZ. There might be other characters that can qualify for multiple versions of themselves for the roster, but I don't think any of them would really be necessary, For example, Todoroki. Does it make sense to have a base version of Todoroki that only uses ice, and have a future / complete version that does use both his ice and fire side? I think it would just be better and more appreciated if Todoroki's moveset was made in a way where you could possibly fight using only ice moves or fire moves if you like, for whatever reason. There are other major questions about the roster that need to be answered in terms of who could make it for the base game. One big question I've considered is probably how many of Class A would make the cut. You could have them all, but I think a good chunk of them would be better off as support characters in a similar way to the Ginyu Force in Dragon Ball FighterZ. Imagine Ida being able to summon members of Class A as one of his special moves, or maybe this type of move would be fitted more to Momo? Regardless, this is a good way to represent some of the less prominent members of Class A. I did have a very rough looking mock-up of what I think a potential roster for this game could look like, as you can see on screen right now. This was made before Season 7 was even airing, so it is outdated a bit, but I think it's a decent starting roster for a game like this. So when I made that roster mock-up, I also started coming up with concepts of what the characters could play as this was originally going to be a whole different video in which I talk about this roster and just say what I think they could play as by taking examples from different fighting games. So if you're interested in still possibly seeing that video, let me know down in the comments below. But I do want to go over at least how one character would play. So why not start with the Super Saiyan Goku, or the starter character of this roster mockup I made, Deku. This Deku will be based on Deku from around the Season 4, Season 5 time of the show, so he will not have all the one-for-all quirks unlocked yet. His normal attacks will vary between from normal punches and kicks, but definitely leaning more towards kicked-based animations, as this is the time where he was developing shoot style in order to stop himself from injuring his arms anymore. Air Force is an ability he has at this point, so that can fill the role of his projectile. It can go two different ways with this ability. Would you have Air Force be more like a fast-moving Hadouken, or something more akin to Ultimate Gohan's Ki Blast from FighterZ? Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta's special move is a perfect fit for Deku, as this fits into the whole shoot style change he was going for in this time period. One aspect of Deku's combat style that should not be overlooked is his mobility. They can choose to represent this in many different ways. Depending on how they decide to handle jumping in this game, giving Deku a double jump could be a way to represent this aspect of him. A special move that works as a hop with different options during the jump, kinda like Kami's Hooligan from Street Fighter 6, is also an option. I believe the best way to represent his mobility would be to instead allow Deku to jump off the corners of the map like Lancelot or Chun-Li do in their respective games. For Deku's supers, we actually have a lot of options to pick from, despite his limited arsenal at this point in the timeline. For his level 1, it might be best to just go with a simple strong punch or kick. Think of something like Buster Wolf or DJ's Samba from Street Fighter 6. His level 2 could be very interesting, however. I propose making his level 2 be full Cowling, thus making it an install super. In this state, Deku could have some form of an increased speed, damage, or maybe his special moves are enhanced in some way. I think adding an install super would be a nice way of adding more depth to what most would see as the starter character that usually has a very basic kit for new players. His level 3 has a few different options. I'm not sure which one I would consider the best. An easy choice would be to have his level 3 be the 1,000,000% punch he used to save Koda at the invasion of the summer camp. You could also have his level 3 be a version of the Black Whip explosion and rampage that happened during the Class A versus Class B training exercise. Another choice that I'm personally fond of, but it might be better suited for a different version of Deku, is a variation of Hit's Shotgun Super from Dragon Ball FighterZ. For Deku, however, we would change how it works. You keep the same premise that the more meter you put into the move, or you charge into the move, would increase the damage. But for Deku, it would also cause more damage to himself in order to reflect on how, at this stage of his development, he would hurt himself when using too much of One For All's power. So think about it this way, if his level 3, just a normal level 3, but if you were to put, let's say, 5 bars or charge 5 bars into it, those 2 extra bars would cause some self-damage to yourself as well, in exchange for doing more damage and maybe having a bigger hitbox or something. But regardless of what you think is best, I think it's safe to say that it's very possible to make a very fun and interesting fighting game character using the My Hero Academia universe. Unfortunately, at this point in time, this is all just theory crafting. There are no announcements of a My Hero Academia fighting game, and it does not seem like there will be any soon. Despite the success of Dragon Ball FighterZ, it seems that anime IP holders are still not interested in making 2D fighting games for anime properties. We have hope, however. Hunter x Hunter Nen Impact is arriving later this year, and while I do not have any interest in the game due to some bad experience with the devs, although to be fair it wasn't really their fault, I still want Hunter x Hunter to succeed, as that will be another example that can be used to hopefully get more anime IP 2D fighters on the market. Let me know down below in the comments what other animes you guys would like to see implemented into a 2D fighting game, as there are truly many that can fit the bill. For me personally, from some of the newer animes that have come out recently, I'd like to see Wistoria Wand and Sword try this. If anyone's watched that, you're a real one. That's a really good anime. I recommend it to people. But if I were to pick an older anime IP, it would probably be the Naruto franchise. But Bandai, if you do this, please let Boruto characters be in the game as well. Especially time skip Boruto characters, I would really appreciate that. Here's hoping in the near future we will be able to celebrate and rejoice at the news of another anime entering into the 2D fighter genre.